Hello and welcome everyone. Mahalo for joining the conversation and attending our Rainbow Town Hall. My name is Randy Soriano and I'm a board member at the Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation, which is the nonprofit organization that proudly brings you Honolulu Pride every year. Today's topic is going to be amazing. It's mental health and stigma in the LGBTQIA community. And we have an amazing group of panelists that are going to be here to share their expertise and personal experiences on these issues and hopefully spark a community awareness that will affect positive change for the future. First, some really quick housekeeping. Our program today will end around 6 p.m. and there will be a Q&A session during the last 10 minutes. But please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A box throughout the conversation. And I will be facilitating with our moderator, Dr. David, and we'll get as many of those questions answered for you as possible. Also, we're going to be live streaming on Honolulu Pride's Facebook, so feel free to encourage your friends and family to tune in as well. Before we start, I want to remind everyone that it is still Honolulu Pride Month, and we're super excited to announce that we've launched our online store. We have tons of Pride swag that you can purchase from the safety of your home. So feel free to visit honolulupride.com/shop to check out our merchandise selection. To get our panel started, I want to introduce our moderator, Dr. David McEwen.
How's it? Is Andrew going to speak first?
No, you're all good. It's all
I'll go. Okay, so aloha. It's wonderful to have so many people interested in healthcare issues. And one of the things we're going to do initially is take a moment and introduce each of us to you, because many of you out there may not have met any of us, or maybe you've met some of us, but all of us are directly and indirectly involved in healthcare in some capacity. I'm serving as moderator today. Just a little bit of details for those that don't know me. I'm a family practice doctor who practiced family practice medicine in Honolulu from 1977, and I retired in 2015. But I remain very involved in many issues in the LGBT community. Minor bit of background here, the Life Foundation, which has now been renamed the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. I was the co-founder of that back in 1982. I'm dating myself, in 1982, and served as president of the board of directors for the first roughly 7 or 8 years. And then I got involved very much in the same gender marriage battle back in 1990 with Dan Foley, the attorney for that famous case, which of course has changed the world. And Dan Foley should be credited for doing such an incredible job with that. And we can talk about those issues at some point if people want. And then roughly 10 years ago, I think I haven't got my calendar with me, myself and a group of other folks in town, about 5 or 6 of us, we started the Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation, which is hosting this event today. And I served as president of the board for the first, I want to say 6 or 7 years. And of course, with both those two organizations and the marriage stuff, I've passed the torch to lots of other incredible community members who the next generation is taking over, and I'm glad to give them the torch. But I'm serving very involved in the background, helping doing fundraising for all of the organizations and bringing a sense of history. And speaking of history, just one other thing that we did about 4 years ago, myself and Dr. Tom Ramsey, who is a professor of math at U of H, together he and I started the AIDS and same-gender marriage archives at University of Hawaii Hamilton Library. There is an archive there. I'm going to have Randy put up a little slide here for a moment, just so that a bit of details for you. The archives covers those two topics, AIDS and same-gender marriage. And the Leilani Dawson is the archivist there. And on this little slide that's coming up, you'll see her phone number. So if you have any questions about that, you can give her a call anytime. And the name of the archives is there listed second. And thirdly is the website at the University Archives at U of H. And to get to that particular, we're planning to digitalize the whole thing, but it'll be a little while, a couple of years before that's all done. In the meantime, in the search engine, just put in AIDS and it'll probably be the first one that comes up. And you can see the exhibit that we had before COVID, from March to September of 2019. And there's lots of slides from that exhibit, and pictures of different things, but it's certainly an incomplete photograph collection, and the amount of material that we have on those two topics is rather huge, but that's there for historical reference that people want to see. So we'll put that slide up maybe at the end again or something like that. In the meantime, what I'd like to do now is go back, and we have guests here today, and I'm going to have each one of them introduce themselves to you and tell you a little bit about themselves, and then we'll jump into some questions that have been submitted by individuals and some of the speakers and some of the organizations, and we'll try to encourage, basically like if you were in a room with a circle of people, and it's okay to interrupt, feel free to send Randy your digital question. If someone is speaking and you kind of trigger something and you want to ask them a question right now, send it to Randy, and Randy can just say, oh, by the way, Trey, this is what he was saying. Someone wants to respond to something. So we wanted to have things going back and forth rather than just having all sorts of lectures or something like that. We don't want to do that. So looking at my screen, the first one that comes up is Trey. So I'll just go around the screen as in a clockwise direction. We'll let Trey introduce himself.
Great. Thank you, Dr. David. Aloha, everyone. My name is Trey Halliday Fenton. I use he, him, his pronouns, and it's such an honor and a privilege to be here with all of you today. I'm currently in private practice in Honolulu, Hawaii. And before that, I worked at 7 different nonprofits here on Oahu, and my bachelor's degree is in elementary education. And I am a licensed clinical social worker and certified substance abuse counselor. And thank you very much for having me. It's an honor.
And you're working where?
In private practice full time. And
so,
my office is in Waikiki, but this is it. It's telehealth right now, so it's all online. So thank you.
Okay. And Keith Pedro, Dr. Keith Pedro.
I'm Keith Pedro. I guess my bio also reads I'm a forensic psychologist with the government. I also have a small private practice in Waikiki, very near to where Trey is. So I've worked with Trey and collaborated with him on a lot of cases or clients that we've worked closely with. And I like to specialize also with working with transgender trans population, work closely with OSU and Kaiser in transitions. Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to be here as well.
And going around clockwise, next is Hao.
Aloha, everyone. My name is Hao, and oops, my phone just fell. Sorry about that. And I'm currently Affirmation Hawaii chapter president. And my mission here is create a loving and accepting environment for young LDS individuals. As they say that, oh, you can be either just gay or just be Christian or Mormon. So this is my mission, that I come in between and say, hey, you can be both gay and you can have your belief in God, and that's okay. And this is why I'm here for. And Affirmation Hawaii chapter is one of the 67 locations around the world of affirmation. So our mission right here is just spreading love and awareness. And one of my top priority here around the community here in Laie, especially next to BYU Hawaii, is to spread the awareness of mental health and how the oppression from community can be a really big impact on people's mental health, especially students right here at BYU Hawaii. So actually, Randy, I have prepared a video so that for us to have a better understanding our struggles as young LDS growing up in the church, and define our sexualities as gay and other spectrums. So please go ahead.
Okay, and then continue to, good.
I really buried the fact that I was gay and didn't even allow myself to think that or accept that.
I was so closeted. I was terrified of having the internal thoughts.
I thought about the church and everything it had taught me throughout my life, And I knew that that couldn't be the case because God would never make me that way.
I was having to come to terms with the fact that I was trans at the same time as the fact that I had recently turned 19 just back in January, and so that whole time I had this massive pressure to go on a mission.
I kept trying to fix myself and to become who others wanted me to be.
I started to hate myself. And those feelings got worse as I started to feel more and more alone.
I even started to self-harm and abuse my body.
There really wasn't anything left. I had given everything of myself to other people.
Everything that I did, I never felt that I was good enough, that I was meeting everyone's expectations and meeting God's expectations.
My dad was basically letting me know that if I didn't go on a mission, I was doing it wrong, and that I was kind of wasting space.
I started developing feelings of depression, but for a long time I kept them to myself because I was ashamed that I felt depressed. I was ashamed that I was having a harder time dealing with life than other people seemed to.
It's been a scary journey to know that you've come to such a low point that you want to take your own life.
I decided one night that if nobody cared, maybe they would care if I wasn't there anymore.
I ended up attempting suicide.
My first attempt at suicide was when I was 17.
I've known 3 people who were LGBT who committed suicide. There were a couple things within the church, mostly just the people though, like people would say rude things. You know, I had a guy once after one of my friends committed suicide, and he comes up to me and he literally looks me in the eye, and he told me, it's just like, well, he was gonna go to hell anyway, so he just sped up the process.
They would give me advice and say, well, you just need to be better. You need to repent. You need to read your scriptures more.
All of the virtue talks and the chastity talks of, you know, if you lose your virtue, you're like a chewed piece of gum.
Men have to be manly, and women have to be this feminine thing, and the two can never cross. And the proclamation to the family talked about how gender is eternal. And I just thought, well, then what does that make me?
Whenever the topic of homosexuality would come up, that it was a mortal experience, and that this was something that as soon as it didn't exist in the spirit world, and we would be immediately freed from its bonds when we died. And in a weird way, that did the opposite of comfort me as I was growing up, because in my mind the option was, well, if things really get that bad, if you just die, then suddenly it's not an issue anymore and you'll be right with God again.
But I also found a lot of good things through the rhetoric of the church. I, reading scriptures, realized that, whatever I was going through, Christ had gone through too. And that also, changed a lot for me, because every hard thing that I was going through, I realized that he had gone through too, and he had felt too, and he was walking alongside me throughout my whole life.
I think if you're trying to reach out to somebody, the most important thing that you can do is to just be there for them.
Because most of the time, when people are in that dark place, they don't think anyone cares enough to really notice a difference if they're gone.
Knowing that someone is there makes such a huge difference, and that someone really cares about you.
You need to be really careful when trying to do your religious comfort type of spiel. I mean, you grow up hearing that you're supposed to tell these people, we love you, but we don't accept who you are.
You can't just tell someone you love them, you have to show it to them. Because when you're in a situation where you feel like you need to die and you want to do something about that, sometimes all we hear in our head is noise.
Instead of just necessarily doling out advice of saying what they're doing wrong or what they have to change, sometimes it's just listening.
No one should die because they feel that they're unwanted.
I've realized that it's not a bad thing to need help. If anything, God wants us to ask people for help.
I feel like without the church, I probably would still be on edge and maybe even gone by now.
Staying involved and trying to focus on making other people happy has really improved my life in so many ways.
Think about how tomorrow can be better, and to think, I've got all these bad things going on in my life, but I also have all these good things too.
If it's hard right now and it only looks like it's getting harder, that's proof that it's not over and you have to keep fighting.
Thank you, Randy.
And continuing on with introductions, Dr. Kevin, can you fill everybody in?
Absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today. We're going to be talking about some moving things, including watching that video. You know, a lot of different types of topics come up. Some of these things might cause distress as we discuss it. And so I just wanted to let everyone know that one of the local numbers that you can call, Hawaii Cares, is 808-832-3100 if any kind of maybe mental health crisis arises from any of these topics. But my name is Kevin Tomita, Kevin Kiyoshi Tomita. I grew up here on Oahu in Palolo Valley. I am second generation from the continental US on my mom's side, and I'm fourth generation settler from Japan on my dad's side. I'm questioning my gender identity and identify as queer for my sexual gender identity, or for my sexual identity, and I use he, him, his pronouns for ease of use. I mention these things because with the topics that we're discussing today, I want you to know that they're coming from my lens, and these are some of the different portions of where my lens is coming from. And so I just wanted you all to know that. I got my doctorate at Palo Alto University, where I studied clinical psychology with an emphasis in LGBTQ psychology and diversity and community mental health. From there, I moved back home here, and I worked at UH for a bit, and now I'm in private practice. So thank you so much.
Okay, great, everybody. And that video, how is really very profound and very helpful for people. So before I start asking questions, I just want to remind the audience that we would love for them to send any questions that they have to Randy, and Randy's going to gather them up and decide who's going to get the questions. And Randy, feel free to interrupt us at any point if something seems very appropriate to what we're saying that very second. Okay, so the first question that I'm going to ask, and I'm not going to point it to anyone. I'm just going to say, you know, whichever one of you responds to, you know, what is, if there, just go for it. So the first question is, what are some of the ways that mental health professionals here in Hawaii can improve their care for queer clients, in general? I'll repeat it again. What are some ways that mental health professionals here in Hawaii can improve their care for queer clients in general? Go, jump in.
Sure, I'll start with that question, Dr. David. So as the first thing, it's an excellent question to begin with. And the first thing that I think of is, I believe as a society, as a culture really, and as mental health providers, we're really just starting to wrap our head around the concept of non-binary. And I really always like to put a plug in and advocate for individuals that may identify as queer, but don't fit in the binary of, let's say, man or woman, or even trans man or trans woman. And I find that many providers just don't quite grasp the concept of someone saying, I have no gender at all, or I'm both genders, or I may use they, them, or Zer or Viver pronouns. And I think that we really need to keep advocating, especially here in Hawaii, for our non-binary individuals. And I think that there continues to be more support and more advocacy and more education around those that don't want to maybe fully transition, but are okay being right in the middle, or may not want to have surgery, may not want hormones, but are really okay with the full, queer identity, embracing that. And I find that I personally see individuals that may have had a provider before me who just couldn't quite grasp that concept of the non-binary and maybe had a negative experience. And so I think that that's something I like to continue to keep helping others assist with the non-binary. And then the last thing I'll say about that is, I think we need to keep advocating for not just a queer individual, they have support, but I want to keep advocating for their spouses and their partners and their family members, because if one person in a family comes out as, let's say, queer or gay or trans, it's not just them, it shifts the entire family dynamic. Everyone in the family changes to some degree, and the whole family needs support. And the person themselves that may be queer have support, but I like to see more support for the family as well.
One thing I would throw in, if you're going to a primary care doctor that you have a relationship with, and I'm showing my age, which I'm proud of, but the reality is a lot of the new definitions and words that the LGBT community are using to the older physician who you might get along with perfectly well, they're probably not going to know what a lot of those words mean because they haven't heard them before. They haven't been taught it in medical school. So if you find you've got a primary care doctor that you like, doesn't understand, just take a moment and define each one of those words just so that they can understand you better. Does anyone else want to respond to that initial question?
I agree with you as well. Thank you for clarifying that.
Kevin, go for it.
Sure. So I think of a couple of things when I think about improving care for queer clients. One thing I think of is utilizing kind of concepts from cultural humility and approaching things from a non-judgmental place and utilizing exploration, open-ended questions to get to know our clients, to get to know their intersecting identities, their culture, where they come from, who they are. And so that's one facet. The other facet that I think of is thinking about what is needed for the community or for people from the community. When I think about what is needed, I like to look at data. For instance, in 2017, the Department of Health put out a sexual and gender minority health report that found that 10% of LGBTQ adults did not have health insurance at that time during, I think it was 2011 to 2015. And 16% of LGBTQ adults did not have a primary source for their personal doctor or healthcare provider. National data has found that like 19% of trans people didn't feel comfortable with healthcare services because they refused medical services altogether. And so what I'm getting the sense of is that we need culturally competent mental health care providers. And how we can do that as mental health care providers is going to relevant CEs, essential, absolutely necessary. And I think really importantly is to listening to and reading the voices of LGBTQ people in Hawaii, getting to know the narratives, getting to know their stories, their difficulties and resiliencies together. I think that participating in public policy is also essential and it's part of our responsibilities. And also developing an understanding of minority stress theory is also essential.
Anyone else? Go ahead, Keith.
I'd like to echo, I think they've covered pretty much a lot of great information, Dr. Tomita and Trey. I want to start with what Trey had mentioned, and I want to echo that. I think building a referral and a consult among our colleagues is important when there's so many changing dynamics with the verbiage and the titles, and to be cognizant of that, it's hard and difficult to be up to date with a lot of it, but it is important to know. I often go to Trey as a consult as well, and other colleagues to keep informed of the changes that often occur, just to be sensitive to the issues that's arising. And I think what Dr. Tomita said is also very important. Cultural sensitivity is quite unique in many ways, that it's not as it's a very dynamic variable, and it changes. We see people in practice in our clinical practice, and there's within group differences as well as between group differences. There's so many variables within the Asian cultures that I've experienced working, and sometimes it's not as blatant as coming out and saying this is what's going on. a lot of times it's through the stories of the families and through their culture that it comes out. So culture sensitivity, it goes beyond just the questionnaires that we've learned in our training, but it's also through the stories that the population, the clients that we see really makes a big difference. So I wanted to just add to that.
Okay. How did you want to add anything else?
Yes, so I find it really helpful with the therapists I'm working with around here, like is that they take space and advocate to what they believe in, and they they expose themselves to LGBT event and community. They were there, so the students, for example, the student at BYU Hawaii would look at them and say, oh wow, I can go to this therapist because she supports gay community and I am a part of it, so I would feel really comfortable to work with her. And even though I'm closeted, I would feel comfortable to come out to her, and I know that her professional area would help me in my way of growing.
Okay. Randy, is there any questions that you have sitting there before I move on to the next one?
No questions.
Okay, so just to remind the audience, Randy will accept any digital questions for it, the group, whether it's in response to anything or if you've got something totally independent of your own thoughts. If you want to ask one or all of the people, just send it to Randy and Randy will interrupt us when there's space. So next question that I'm going to ask all four of you. What considerations are made regarding systems of oppression, and how is that incorporated into the mental health care of youth? Repeat it again. What considerations are made regarding systems of oppression, and how is that incorporated into the mental health of youth? Does someone want to jump in on that? Go ahead, Kevin.
I can jump in on this one. So in thinking about looking at systems of oppression and how it affects our clients and how we might tailor our treatment modalities and styles to addressing that in therapy, I think it's first important to acknowledge how systems of oppression affect people of different intersecting identities. So we're looking at systems of oppression, including institutional discrimination, looking at the law, looking at systems in workplaces, anything that involves power over and influencing, utilizing that power to influence anybody underneath them. It's so important to look to see how that might affect someone. When I think about this, I think about the minority stress theory, which posits that minorities or people that are underprivileged experience additional stressors that other people don't experience. When it comes to these systems of oppression, people are getting bombarded with different forms of discrimination. And I think that it's first and foremost my job to help people understand the trauma that they might be experiencing, to create a meaning-making process to help them understand what is going on for them, to help them understand how they may have internalized these messages, and to help utilize self-compassion and self-love to be able to counteract some of these things and to process this as well. It's a lot of difficult work, I think, because when we're talking about this trauma, it's often not a singular traumatic event, but a constant trauma that can exist around people throughout a lot of their lives.
Anyone else?
Sure, I'll
Okay.
go. And just exactly, what Dr. Tomita just said, and to carry on, of course, if we're talking about LGBTQ individuals, queer individuals, we just can't act like systems of oppression aren't going to exist. We hear it all the time, unfortunately, every day. There's things happen in society, life is not fair. And hearing the stories that these individuals tell us, exactly what Dr. Tomita said is accurate. Now, what I like to do with working with individuals is discuss and process the oppression that they may be experiencing, and then as a social worker, reframing this and empowering them to have a voice, to see themselves as a whole person, even though they may want to reject and just cannot stand different parts of their body and would give anything to be someone else, someone different in some way, shape, or form to accept this is where you're at today, and this is how our society is today, and what can you do about it to get a voice and to get into action. And I think that, you know, taking the oppression and turning it into empowerment, I see people really come into themselves, and sometimes it takes that to, you know, make a movement and to get heard. And so I really like to turn this into empowerment and strengths and turn it into real solution focused opportunities for individuals.
Anyone else? Because I'll say something if unless someone else wants to jump in.
Yes, I would like to add it up to Jay's opinion on oppression, is that first we have to realize and accept the fact that it is there. One of the experience I have here is that people tend to avoid the real issue. People tend to avoid, or, you know, LGBT individuals, they're not existing, or like their mental health is just a myth, you know. But we want to make it a difference. You would like to sit down and say, hey, this is not a myth. This is not like a fake issue. This is some serious issue that we should pay attention to. And these are the ways we can help LGBT individuals. If we cannot help them, refer them to the help that they need to help them to grow with themselves.
Let me throw, as I sit and listen to everything, I'm going to do a little weird thing. And it gets into a little bit of my own personal life. The reality is I'm 75 now, or pardon me, 74, just turned 74. And so as I mentioned, I diagnosed Hawaii's first case of AIDS in 1981, I think it was 82. And so I was practicing regular primary care of any kind of patient in the office, but all of a sudden I started getting HIV patients, and I mean a lot of them. And I found myself thrown into this new role that I embraced of activism, and very aggressive activism and intense networking. And as I matured and learned from so many people, and I kept trying to distill out, you know, well, every person is unique. What's wrong with this system and what's going on? And then I got into the marriage issue, and that released all this hate issue as well. And I'm seeing this again. And, you know, what are the dynamics? What's the foundation of this? And then I got involved in trying to put the Legacy Foundation together. And, you know, it's just kind of organizing the gay community again, but not with a major crisis at the moment, but there were still lots of civil rights things going on and stuff. And so what over the years, I've come to this is an oversimplification, but again, I'm not talking about individuals, I'm talking about our society. The thing that I've felt and observed and witnessed, be it young people, old people, is this human's capacity to fear and hate. And like, why do these play and all these different things and variations today, every day? Why does this keep on happening? What is it about us? And where does it come from? And someone might justifiably criticize me, but I found it to prove out to be very, very real, is that basically all of this comes basically from various faiths, or one can use the word faith or religion, that, you know, which are, all of the religions that are dominant in the world are very old, which is perfectly fine. From another time when people understood nothing about things the way we do today. And a lot of people carry forward a lot of that baggage, and some of it's wonderful stuff, a lot of it's baggage. And what I find for the LGBT community specifically, that religious institutions have done a marvelous job of promoting hatred and teaching the next generation hatred. And like, you know, you might say, well, where in the hell is this teaching going on? I'm going on, well, have you ever heard of religious schools? They're teaching, you know, hatred towards the LGBT community. The altar where sermons are being given by whatever that's being taught there. And so basically it comes from, and that spills over into politics. And of course, those people have no trouble talking, and they're teaching hatred all of the time. So the challenge is for the LGBT community, and it's very difficult. I mean, some of those kids in the video that you saw that how provided, I mean, what they're going through is just horrendous, and frankly, I'd say it's criminal. And the church has taught them to hate themselves. And I had a little epiphany, which this would be back here in Hawaii in the late 80s, when I was trying to figure all of this out, and I suddenly realized in my own life, because I refused to accept the hate and the thing, I just keep on fighting it, but what's my explanation to all these haters who I was dealing with in the legislature and in the churches, although there were many churches here that were exceptions to the rule. Thank God, bless them all. But I came up with a very simple idea that I've used in my practice before I retired in dealing with young kids, you know, in their 12, 13, 14, 15, which would not be too often because I was mostly an adult and young adult practice, but especially with the young adults. And I used it, and it was fascinating number of kids, young adults, that it never had occurred to them when I said this sentence to them. But I've simply said over and over and over again now over the years, I simply say, being gay or lesbian or trans or whatever, that's God's gift to you. And don't let anyone tell you it's not a gift. And embrace that gift, study it, learn from it, and go out and express it in whatever way you are. But that everybody in life, no matter where you are in the world, life is a gift. God doesn't make mistakes. Being gay is God's gift to you. So embrace that. And it's amazing the number of kids have never have thought that being gay was actually a gift. And certainly you'll see gay people do amazing things throughout the world. So I would just throw that out as when we're talking about systems of oppression, it's really hate and fear, and it's coming basically from the teaching world. And we need to be prepared to stand up and just call a spade, stop teaching hate. And of course, the church is going to give you all sorts of reasons why it's not hate. You know, it's bullshit. And you're going to politics are going to give you the same stuff. You know, that's bullshit, and just throw it back at them. It's my gift, and, you know, work on from there. So what I'm trying to do by expressing this is just to give a new thought to just people that are sitting out there that haven't thought that being gay or lesbian or trans or whatever, it is your gift from God. So anyone else want to comment on this question or jump in? Randy, did you have a question there?
Yeah, I have another question, but does anyone want to kind of chime in on this before we move on to the next one?
I would just like to say the best website that I recommend individuals for this is if someone does identify more, let's say, as transgender, and they're discussing to me any forms of, you know, feeling like rights are violated or anything along those lines, I would absolutely recommend transequality.org. And that's just a really incredible website for so many different reasons. If anyone's wanting to, you know, change legal documents, or it's just a really powerful website. But if the second someone starts talking to me about any kind of oppression or needing help with not feeling like they're being treated fairly, let's say at work or across the board, there's a whole section called Know Your Rights. So transequality.org is the one I would go to. Yes, that's right, Randy. So just to put a plug in, that's a great website.
Great. Okay, so Randy, you had a question there from someone?
Of course. The next question from our audience is, how would you help LGBTQ clients experiencing intimate partner violence? Anyone want to take a stab at that one? It's a little heavy, so we can have it marinate. Dr. McEwen, if you want to jump into maybe another question.
Okay, well, I'll let everyone think about that for a little bit, and then Randy, you come back with it and ask it a second time. The next question I'm going to ask here: what role does Native Hawaiian culture play in your mental health treatment for the queer clients? Would someone like to jump in? Just raise your hand. Go ahead, Keith.
Oh, hi. I thought Kevin was going to take that one. The question is, what role does Native Hawaiian culture play in mental health treatment for queer clients. This is when I saw the question, I thought of several clients that I work with, and in various age groups that I work with. And interesting enough, 50% Hawaiian, 60% Hawaiian. And I have good resources, thank goodness, for that people who are in the community, who are Native Hawaiian. And culturally, again, I go back to this idea of how they report their symptoms, and culturally it's different. It's non-traditional. And I think part of this cultural practice is being transparent with individuals of what I know and what I need to learn. Having to claim that I know much more than what I think I do know is part of that transparency in working with the culture, and having the ability to tap into resources. Some of the great resources, if I can name a few, is Trey. Also, people at the University of Hawaii. I'm just drawing blanks right now, but culturally, the Hawaiian culture with the hula and tapping into practices there. Some of the resources. I think it's very important, the kupuna, to bring that in as part of the cultural. I'm drawing a blank on some of the names, but I'm going to hold off there. I guess my ultimate response is it's a very important piece, and it's non-traditional in the settings that I work in. It's sometimes very non-traditional, and it may not even be in my office. It may even be at a place where they lost someone. It may be in the community. It might have to be at the gravesite where they lost their partner. So it's sometimes not even traditional in an office setting. So just to share that.
Okay. Does anyone else want to jump in with some thoughts?
Yeah. I was really resonating with what you're just saying right now. I was thinking about how, when thinking about culture, like even in Hawaii, there are so many different experiences of what it means to be in Hawaii. And thinking about my experiences versus someone who is Kanaka and growing up in Hawaii, and the various aspects of trauma, of intergenerational trauma that might be there for someone. From Captain Cook getting here to the United States overthrow of Hawaii. Thinking about all of these different components to what can contribute to the person's experience in life, their difficulties, the various symptom presentations that we would call from a Western psychological lens. And then I think that it's important to consider that, to be able to address it accordingly as it's fit, depending on the client or the patient. But also, I think that it's important for us as mental health providers to not just be humble in our exploration of culture, but also exploration of treatment and healing. We are one facet of healing, and there are so many other facets of healing. There's a variety of traditional Hawaiian methods of healing that I don't fully understand or know, that wouldn't be appropriate for me to engage in as a therapist. And so I think it's important to work with colleagues from across different fields that have different expertise, and to know where my competencies lie. I think it's important for us also to try to understand or to learn Hawaiian language, and if not all Hawaiian language, to understand the important values and understand them not from the English version of what they sound like, but from the Hawaiian lens. Again, not necessarily to fully incorporate into a practice, only as we're competent, but to consider these things as we're moving through our treatment modalities. There's a couple of books that I have next to me that I would recommend for any mental health clinicians or any medical provider, or honestly anyone. This is one of them. Ooh, shucks. It's not popping up because of my background, but it's called Nanai Ike Kumu. I got this one at, I'm forgetting what they're called, but Namea opened up a new shop downtown, and it's fabulous. Like the first few, or there's four main chapters: guiding principles and values, historical trauma and resilience, grief and modern Hawaii life, and Ho'oponopono, a way of life. And so considering these things,
you
I
want
think
to
is
spell
essential.
out the name? Could you spell out the name and the author for the audience?
Sure. Can I type in, oh, I'll just spell it out. Someone else can type that. Nana Ike Kumu, Nana space I space KE space KUMU. That one
And
just came out this year.
The author?
It's through the Liliuokalani Trust. So it just came out this year. Ah, thank you, Randy.
I also wanted to add that there's another video at the University of Hawaii that was produced by the University of Hawaii called Ke Kulana He Mahu. I think that's what it's called. It was done by Hina Wong. And it talks about the Mahu who have a place in society here. And it's a very good cultural video to understand how Western society and religion, as Dr. McEwen talked about, had sort of like shifted the mentality of oppression and society back then. So it's a really good cultural video to understand what it was like before, in the culture of Hawaii. Just to add to that.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Yes, so I think it's a part of our young generation to let our kupuna, our aunties and uncles know that the existence of our LGBT community and what knowledge that we can find from social media, from the internet, or any reliable resources to show our aunties and uncles and help them to have a better understanding of ourselves and the community. And every one of my aunties say to me that every child come to my life is like a new page of learning, a new learning experience. So I am blessed and happy to show my aunties and uncles, and they're so willing to learn. And most of them, before I show them the resources that I have, most of them, they know of it, but they don't know how to react when a gay child come to them, and what would be the appropriate responses. So I think it is important as a part of the young generation to come to our aunties and uncles and introduce about the cultures and about the communities.
Anyone else, or Randy?
Sure. I'll also say one thing first. Just spoiler alert: I'm not Hawaiian. Just to be clear. But I just feel so fortunate that I have moved here to these islands and to have been accepted and embraced by the Hawaiian culture. I mean, is that not the ultimate gift? And I find that everyone that I have the opportunity to talk with and work with that is Native Hawaiian, I just feel like the most lucky person in the world. And just to realize that everyone's different, all human beings are different, and we've all had different upbringings depending on what island you're from or what little nook or cranny from the island that you're from. And so just like any other culture, we all have different life experiences, and I learned from every single one. And in regards to Native Hawaiian and queer culture, of all the cultures I have the opportunities to working with, I can honestly say that Native Hawaiians are probably the most accepting. Truthfully, they just get it. They get it. They understand that the Kani and the Wahine can mix and match, and it's just no problem. They don't even blink, generally speaking. And so that's beautiful. That is beautiful for myself personally, as a trans individual, to be just embraced and accepted more so than where I came from. It kind of baffled people's mind on the mainland, but I get here and they're just like, we've known this forever. Like we get it. The
Hawaiian community got it before the holidays even arrived.
100%. So it's really beautiful to, my specialty is gender. And when I see someone come in that is a Native Hawaiian and they start the coming out process, quite oftentimes it's a million times easier than majority of other cultures where, some people it's challenging for at first, for the family member. So for Native Hawaiians.
I'd like to speak to that as well.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I think it's absolutely incredible. I really appreciate Hawaiian culture for that, among so many other things. I think here, a really important concept to understand too is that we need to be able to decolonize our minds and assist other people in whatever efforts they would like to engage in to decolonize their minds. I think that traditionally, the Hawaiian people, I can't speak directly to, but from what I understand, traditionally the Hawaiian people are more accepting of a variety of different sexual and gender identities that aren't necessarily played out in various Western cultures. However, with colonization, a lot of different beliefs were kind of put to the wayside for a lot of different families. And so we get to see the effects of colonization on our LGBTQ or queer Hawaiian individuals, and helping to assist navigating through that trauma, I think, is absolutely essential as well.
Well, and I would oversimplify it by simply saying that Cook's group, they just brought hate and fear with religion. And just, that's how it all started here. Randy, do you have anything that's sitting out there in the way of a question that we should know?
So just some comments from the crowd in response to that question about how would you help LGBTQ clients experiencing intimate partner violence. Someone did share with us that the Domestic Violence Action Center has an LGBTQ plus advocate and support groups for IPV survivors. So that's a resource if someone wants to look into that, if they are experiencing that.
Did they give a phone number as well for calling or anything?
What I can do is I'll go ahead and pull the contact information for DVAC and I'll put it in the chat for everyone.
Okay, great. Okay, so I think I'm gonna jump down to the next question here. How many mental health professionals specialize in the care for the community, queer community, and what's their experience in this type of care? And I'll open that up to anyone. The question is, it's actually asking how many people specialize in this. I would throw out before anyone answers, I don't think there's a lot. Unfortunately, and it's sad, you may be seeing the 4 in the state that are doing it. I certainly am aware of other psychiatrists that I know that are involved in it as well that aren't involved, but the numbers are not large. Do you 4 have any observations?
I have a few that I can mention, and maybe this might spark discussion about others that might pop up, but Dr. Brito, Janet Brito, sex therapy, Hawaii, Dr. Conti, William Conti, I think he's in Waikiki, does some work, I think east-west something of Hawaii. Us here, of course, Dr. Stevens, who I think might have asked a question in one of the Q&As as well, the Lavender Clinic. These are some various different resources.
So I have a few resources that I sent to Randy on the second slide of my PowerPoint slide. So Randy, could you please help me share that? And I'm gonna talk about the resources that I have. Starting with Queer PR Institute. So this is a suicide prevention, and it is available no matter if you're in Hawaii or no matter if you're in the States. And if you know of someone that going through a hard time, these are the hotline that you can call. And also this institute would help you to be a professional instructor on suicide prevention. So that would really help with if you're working with a group of LGBT plus community and individuals. And the second thing is Mama Dragon. So this is a group of mothers that empower and support, educate of LGBTQ children. So what I find is really helpful to find allies as parents, because a lot of parents who have gay kids, they are so terrified and they don't have enough resource how to be parents of a gay kid. So this is Mama Dragons come in, and they would be the ally for LGBTQ children. And the fact that just one supportive adult can reduce 40% of suicide attention from young children. So I would like to put Mama Dragons right here as a really, really good resource for parents as allies. And
Mama Dragons here in Hawaii, or is it national?
It's national, so you can access and reach out to them no matter where you are. And the third one is also not in Hawaii, is also national. So Ellen Joy, she's actually a really good connection that I have through affirmation, and her mission is dedicated to reducing the rate of suicide and homelessness in the LGBTQ community. She actually had a really good TED talk on conversion therapy. So she is actually like a survivor of conversion therapy herself, and that is her motivation to start this foundation to help LGBT community and individual going through their struggles, and not to help them not to be involved in any conversion therapy, because it is such a cruel method for any LGBT community and individuals. And the last connections I have, they are in Hawaii. And Elizabeth Rago is actually a licensed clinical social worker and certified substance abuse counselor in Hawaii. She is located in the North Shore and actually a counselor of a lot of BYU Hawaii students. And she is also passionate on LGBT community and their needs, and work with them through their feelings, thought, and struggles. So actually, if you're in the North Shore area and would love to connect with her, she is amazing lady that would help you through your process, or help you find resources. So really, really, really amazing. And the last one, Amanda Ford, she is a BYU Hawaii professor in peace building department of the school, and she's also a licensed social worker with emphasis on mental health and counseling. And one fun fact about Amanda is she is a Zen master. She does meditation, yoga, and mindfulness, and she does it for free. So if you want to look up, the Facebook page is Mindful Movement and Meditation with Amanda. So with this COVID situation, she does the meditation virtually every Saturday at 8 a.m. And hopefully when everything like starting to get back to normal, she can go back to in-person classes. So the job she's doing here for the community is free. And what her mission is, talking to yourself is a good way to grow and validate your feelings and your growth as a person, including your sexualities. So these are resources that would be very helpful for us as LGBT queer individuals. We reach out to these resources according to our needs.
Okay, great. Anyone else have anything to add? Okay, then going down my little master list, the next question is, what treatment modality changes or considerations, if any, are made for BLPOC queer clients? I assume that stands for bisexual people of color? No? Okay. Clarify, someone educate me because I'm blowing it.
Black and Indigenous people of color.
Okay. So let me repeat it. Would you please read the whole question so it sounds better than what I'm doing?
Yes. What treatment modality changes or considerations, if any, are made for Black and Indigenous people of color queer clients?
Okay, and I'll let whoever wants to jump in start. Okay, so I'll let people think about it, and especially the audience.
Or actually,
okay,
it looks like Trey, you look like you're about to hit the button. Why don't you go first?
Okay, go Trey.
Okay. I couldn't hear you, but I can tell you're telling me to go.
Okay. Go ahead, Kevin. Go ahead.
Okay. I'm gonna keep mine pretty short for now, and then I can kind of drive off of you all. I want to hear other voices right now, but I think in some ways I gave a little bit of my response to this in some of the previous questions, and that's, utilizing cultural sensitivity, like Keith was saying, cultural humility, to be able to navigate the different experiences that people might be having. We can talk about Black experiences, Indigenous people's experiences, other people of color experiences, etc. But again, there's going to be individual differences within all of those different identities. And so I think it's important to be able to jump in and to understand their experiences. Included in that, like I've said previously, is looking at different aspects of intergenerational trauma, understanding that some of the healing that's going to take place is really the work of helping or assisting the client and healing from their ancestors' traumas that they might not even know all about currently. And so there's a lot of kind of nuanced work to be done there. But a lot of the stuff that I mentioned previously is very similar, just applied to BIPOC.
Okay, Trey, did you want to jump in?
Sure. Thank you. Just to add on to that, I would say, this is just what Dr. Tomita just said. It's just another level of just the multiple minority stress, and knowing that may be, of course, even more challenging with having the additional stress of being minority due to maybe race or ethnicity, and then queer. They may be forcing oppression from even more angles. Now, something that I hear frequently that is extremely challenging for individuals is if they may be transitioning from one gender to another, they may be switching from, let's say, quote unquote, male, female, multiple times during the day. So they may be switching, going back and forth, male, female, male, female, male, female, many times a day already. I usually hear this more from trans women, I'm going to be honest, because our society allows men to wear, I won't get into all of it, but I hear this more from the trans women. They're switching already, going back and forth throughout their day. Genders. Then they're having to sometimes switch back and forth races and ethnicities throughout their days or lives too, depending on what side of the family they're hanging out with, or what friends they're hanging out with, or what environment they're on. So it's just the switching is a whole nother layer as well sometimes for people. So it's confusing enough if you're a queer individual transition in the early stages of transitioning. And then if you add another layer on of race and ethnicity, it just heightens the challenging life experience that we talk about. So it's just another layer of possibility of stigma, of racism, sexism, you name it, that we just continue to process and talk through.
I think you just set me up, Trey. That's a good
There you go.
Yeah, no, that's a great segue, because I was thinking about I work with biracial couples, and that, unless we catch it, the treatment is a little different, because you have to compartmentalize some of the issues. They overlap. Unless we really detail out the part that might look the same, there might be some oppression in one area that hasn't been worked out. And so the issues have to be compartmentalized before it's even because they overlap. The communication disputes overlap. Whether it's because it's biracial, same-sex, there is issues between same-sex couples that are biracial, and so it can be complicated, and challenging and fascinating at the same time. It just takes a little longer, and I like a challenge, but it's also very puzzling at the same time.
Any other comments?
Just two that I wrote down that I just kind of wanted to mention because I thought they were worth mentioning were some considerations when thinking with working with BIPOC queer clients is thinking about the effects that colorism might have in their lives. And so there are different levels of difficulties that can arise from colorism. And then also understanding the model minority issues that might occur and how that might affect the clients as well.
Okay. Randy, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, of course. So Kevin, actually, there was a comment in our Q&A box. Someone wanted to thank you for kind of going over the topics that were in the previous question. Specifically, they wanted to segue to a new question. Do any of you have any advice on how to negotiate the duality or two-spirit concept of the Mahu with the modern Western idea of transgender? And I think that kind of ties into a lot of what we were just talking about in the last section. So if any of you guys have some more insight into that, I think that would be great.
I'm sorry, Reddy, could you repeat that again? Is it up here on the board somewhere?
Oh yeah,
No.
so do you have any advice on how to negotiate the duality or two-spirit concept of the Mahu with the modern Western idea of transgender?
Yes and no. This is complex. This is complex stuff. This is some of the, for me, some of the more fun things too. Navigating something that's really tricky conceptually and trying to understand where different ideas are coming from and trying to understand my biases and trying to put those on the side to understand a person or an individual. So I think, I've met Hawaiian people who are Mahu, and I've met Hawaiian people that are trans. And people choose labels purposefully. There's intention behind choosing a label. Labels can also shift and adjust over time. But when thinking about the gender of Mahu, there is a traditional role that's associated. There are various responsibilities that are associated. And I don't know all of those, and I can't get into all of those, but I do know that much is there. Similar to other genders, there might be specific traditional roles that might be assigned in different ways. When thinking about the concept of trans, we have a very westernized understanding of what it means to be trans. And I'll even go as far as to say that if you think about gender at all from a cultural lens, every gender will have a different type or orientation of what it means to be a cis man, for instance, as we would call it. Every different culture would have a different idea of what it means to be a cisgender woman, for instance. And so I think really what it's all about is understanding that gender identity as unique and embedded within that culture. It cannot be separated.
And I want to add, I mean, I'm going to date myself because I'm this is hair color, by the way. So I come from a generation that we had templates to look at. We had templates like Leave It to Beaver. We had templates to look at what a model family should look like. And as Dr. Tomita said, there are roles that are prescribed to different societal roles. That doesn't mean that we have templates to role model from. It doesn't mean that we have to abide by these templates. I think the beauty of society is that we create and we evolve over time. We don't fit in these roles, as Trey was saying, these non-binary, we don't have to shift from one end to the other. We're allowed to, be in the center and don't have to make a decision. And I think that's the beauty of capitalizing on this theory of non-binary. So with that, I'm taking all the concepts and saying, then why do we have to ascribe to one specific template? It is to create at some point, when we hit that level of nirvana or at the very top, we create our own family system. Because at the end of the day, there is no ideal family. I was talking to a client earlier in the week, and she was describing what her ideal relationship would look like. And basically, in her own template of her mind, she described a very dysfunctional template. And so I said, well, maybe what we're looking for is not the ideal template. What we're looking for is dysfunctional. So I think we have to shift our thinking. Maybe we're not, I think what we've been looking for is functionality in a dysfunctional world, but maybe we should be looking for dysfunctional. So I think the mentality has to shift. What is a template? And if anything, we ascribe to our own template. We might have some disagreements with that from the audience, but that's my theory. So I'm gonna mute myself now.
Okay. Anyone else want to jump in?
Yes, I think the way society has been built from our ancestor, we create the norms by ourselves, or our ancestor created the norms by themselves. So as we grow and society keep changing, we expose ourselves to to the fact that in fact there are different ways to be a human, and it is our job to normalize it. And it's okay that non-binary exists. It's okay that transgender exists. This is a part of this is a job for our individual to normalize it in the society.
Okay, so
I
I
have,
got
I have one thing to add before we move on.
Okay.
I think this is important. From what my understanding, nobody on this panel identifies as Mahu or as a trans Hawaiian person. And I think that it's important to say that right now, this discussion is taking place among people that don't identify that way. So audience, I hope that you can take what we're saying with a grain of salt and do your own research when it comes to some of these things. And something that we might do in the future to make the panel kind of a more whole experience is maybe to include one of those voices here as well.
Thank you. Respectfully, Dr. Tomita, thank you for saying that.
Okay, next question here. What support groups are available for LGBTQ in Hawaii, such as support groups for individuals living with HIV, or for youth, or for substance abuse? When you get to the substance abuse, I just thought I would quickly point out, yesterday, Sunday's paper had a whole section on substance abuse. And if you are particularly interested in it, there's a lot of useful information in that. But anyhow, that's our question. Anyone want to jump in about support groups?
Sure, I'll start with that one. I think it's a great question. Support groups are invaluable, and the top ones that come to my mind are, you mentioned it before, Dr. David, Life Foundation, and now it's the Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction Center. They do incredible work with individuals living with HIV. That is the first one that comes to my mind, is Hawaii Health and Harm Reduction. The Lavender Center and Clinic. I spent 3 years working there and can say that they do really incredible groups. They've moved all of them online at this point, which is great, safe in Zoom meetings. They specialize in working with LGBTQ individuals and primarily trans individuals. And when it comes to
let me throw in one thing about Hawaii Health Harm and Reduction, particularly for folks, is that about 25% of their staff is transgendered.
Absolutely.
And so they're heavily involved with that community and delivering services very well to that community.
Absolutely. And I interned there, and every day at 8 a.m. they would start off playing like RuPaul and have drag queen races. It was a very, very fun place to intern. So I love that crew there. So, and the last thing in regards to substance use, I would say any 12-step recovery program. And for youth, Al-Anon, families that are afflicted with the disease of addiction, or Alateen are the top ones I think of for the recovery community. 12-step, any 12-step program, or Al-Anon or Alateen.
Okay, anyone else want to add? Someone was saying something and it didn't come through. How do you have something to say? I see your hand coming forward.
Yes, thank you for catching that. So I saw a question about domestic abuse question earlier, and it just popped up in my mind now that I know of this hotline. Is called Hawaii State Coalition Against Domestic Violence Hotlines, and the phone number for this is 808 841 0822. So this is the group that would support with domestic violence issues, and it is also one of the hotlines on the island if you want to add it up.
Okay. Got another question here. If our panelists don't have anything to add. to the last one. Okay. Is there a dedicated helpline and or crisis line in Hawaii that LGBTQ individuals can dial or text? There's got to be. Anyone speak up?
Sure, I'll go. There's one that I think that's a really great, it's a website you can look up. It's called onoursleeves.org. And it's a really incredible website that's just got lots and lots of Hawaii resources listed.
On our
sleeves. Our sleeves.org. Yeah, it's got a lot of great, it's a local Hawaii website with a lot of great resources for crisis lines.
Trey, I'm going to ask you to spell the third word. On our what?
On our ONOURSLEEVES sleeves.
Sleeves, like on your arm.
On our sleeves.
Okay.
So it's a great website. Yeah, On Our Sleeves is a great website because I could name specific ones, but on that website, it's just a slew of all that we could name. But I did see that it says you could text Aloha to 741-741. And I think just to put in the plug that we don't have to call anymore to 911 or crisis. We can text, and that's invaluable to our youth population.
I would throw out as a suggestion to other folks, if you go to the Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation.com, all one word, Hawaii LGBT Legacy Foundation.com, and you go for resources, they have tons of resources throughout the state for many, 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 many different things. I haven't reviewed it in the last few days, but there's a lot of helpful stuff there.
Beautiful. And can I give one more trans lifeline?
Of course.
Sure. Thank you for the the legacy. That's great to know. And then I'll just toss out one number that I didn't see was on our sleeves, is the trans lifeline. And that's 877-330-6366. And it's 24 hours a day, and people know you're talking to someone queer identified on the other end, which is, helpful and very important for this panel.
I'm going to recommend 2 books for people that are interested in history, and it really gets down to the issues of what I talked about earlier, the whole teaching of hate and the religious and political and all that kind of stuff. This one here, I'll read it to you because it's going to come out backwards, but Out of the Bishop's Closet. And the author is Antonio Feliz, F-E-L-I-Z. And it's a daring testimony of faith of a gay Mormon high priest. And there's an updated section in the end. And it's particularly interesting when it came out initially in 1989, and it was updated in 1992. And I found very compelling and interesting and fascinating about the documents that demonstrate the founder of the church, Joseph Smith, sealing men to men at the very beginning of the Mormon church. And a lot of people have debated whether that's a form of marriage or what, but it's clearly there and it's in the documents. And of course, a lot of my Mormon friends, it says the Mormon church does a lot to cover that up so you don't know about it. So if you want to learn about it and confront the church leaders, it's Out of the Bishop's Closets by Antonio Feliz. The second one that I'll recommend it to you, which I don't have a copy here, it's in the archives. It's called The Changing Face of the Priesthood. The Changing Face of the Priesthood. And it's written by Donald Cousin, C-O-Z-Z-E-N. I believe it came out in 2000. That was a very moving, even though I'm not Catholic, I've been very involved with the Catholic Church because it was Father Damien, which actually brought me to Hawaii. When I was 13 years old, I decided to try to be like Damien, even though I wasn't Catholic. I thought he was a good man. He did good things. And my timing was perfect. 100 years after his work, AIDS arrived and I was here. So I kind of used Father Damien as kind of my spiritual guide. But in this particular book, as I was learning more about the Catholic Church, I had 2 other interesting experiences, which I certainly don't mind discussing publicly. But I had, in the 80s, I had a number of Catholic priests that were my patients, and they were in the order for Father Damien, and they were living in the tower there at the top of Bishop Street, and of course, right next to Father Damien's church there. And I would often do office visits at the tower, the residential tower, because it would be easier for the patients. And one time in the penthouses where Bishop Ferrario was there, and he one time wanted to meet with me, and he wanted to talk about condoms because as he said, I don't mind you guys using condoms. It's just don't get the media away from my face. I don't want to talk about condoms, as if I had control over the media. I had trouble explaining to him that I don't control the media. But what I found fascinating, and it gets to this book that I'm talking about, The Changing Face of the Priesthood. I was taking care of a young fellow with HIV who had been abused by Bishop Ferrario. And we had been in much conversation with him, and I find it very duplicitous to be sitting there talking to him and having him tell about HIV when he said to him, I knew that he was abusing young men. How many, I have no idea. And then, the church has got all these. So what this book, The Changing Face of the Priesthood, taught me, the author, he had been, at the time that he wrote the book, he had been a priest for 30 years. He'd written lots of books for the Catholic Church and had access to the Catholic Church Vatican archives. And he was an approved person, so he could go in and look at anything he wanted. And he wrote this particular book about and he went all across America and went to a lot of different places where the priests live. And he came up with a conclusion, and it's very well documented and it's very well explained. And he goes into it in great detail. He says basically about 50% of the priests at that time were gay. And the challenge, of course, therefore, the Catholic Church, you've got the largest gay organization in the world, trying to prove that it doesn't approve of gay people, and trying to convince you to believe it. And that way they could protect their little world. This is my opinion, little world. We guarantee we're homophobic. We don't approve it, yet 50% of them are gay. And that hypocrisy continues on right now. And I find it an absolutely distressing and fascinating, and lots of psychopathology. And so I recommend that people that want to know more about the Catholic Church and the Mormon Church. And any else? I think we're getting close to our theoretical end time. Are there any more questions from the audience that are creeping up? Randy?
So we have one that says, what are some LGBTQIA+ affirmation practices organizations can implement to better support young people?
Oh, it's right for you.
Yes. So this is where Affirmation Hawaii chapter exists, and we're located in Laie, right next to BYU Hawaii campus. And we are the great resource for young generations. So if you are young generation and you would like to join a community with other young BYU Hawaii students and even UH Manoa students, they are a part of this community too. You're welcome to join us. We have absolutely a lot of activities coming up, including Halloween or something like that, just to get to know each other as a community. And
Can you give them a phone number and a website they can reach you at?
Yes, definitely. You can search us on Facebook at Affirmation Hawaii chapter, and follow us on Instagram at Affirmation Hawaii.
No phone number?
Yes. So phone number, you can reach out to me personally for any inquiries and any question. And the phone number would be 808-206-2022.
Let me throw out the idea, the other three folks, if you would like to put your phone number out to the crowd or not, I'm not sure, but you're certainly welcome to do it if you wish. Otherwise, everybody's got your name and they can look you up.
I can put my
Individual.
email out there. One of the things that I wanted to convey, I don't know if this person is still on, but someone asked a question about intimate partner violence, and I wasn't sure if that question was about them or about someone they know. Either way, I still have a little bit of concern lingering in the back of my head. And so if you'd like to ask any direct questions or consult with about the situation, whether or not you're looking for therapy, you can reach me at my email. I'm kind of exposed to anybody that might have any kind of questions about different kind of services that might exist in the community. And my email is kevintomita22@gmail.com, kevintomita22@gmail.com.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, I want to thank Randy for organizing this wonderful event. And I want to thank all the participants and the audience. Just a curiosity for us and for the audience as well. Do you have any kind of feedback at this point, Randy, as to attendance? Because I heard it was might be interesting to know.
Yeah, so we actually, at the peak on Zoom, we had about 30. And then on Facebook, we had reached about 431 people so far. So okay. That was great. I think you guys all did amazing. I want to thank all of you guys for participating. Dr. David, you want any closing statements?
Well, only in closing, this is actually a little thing for Randy. Randy, for the 5 of us that were on the panel, when you have spare time, could you send the 5 of us each other's email and phone numbers if you have them, just so that we can reach each other? Because one of the things, as probably most of the audience understands, but healthcare workers really reach out to other healthcare workers to get clients help. And the 5 of us, I think, would all feel comfortable having you sharing that with us. We can't all go public with our stuff, but certainly Randy has been talking to us, so that would be appreciated.
Of course, we'll do.
Thank you, Bra. So thank you, everyone. And it's close to 6 o'clock, I think.
Thank you.
So 3 minutes. Oh.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Nice to work with you all.
Great conversation.
We all deserve a Screen Actors Guild card for running on time.
Yeah, this is really great conversation.
Yes.
This is awesome.
Oh, before we close, I would like to welcome to all of the members or all of the individuals on the island to Affirmation Hawaii chapter. We need your story here. We need inspiration. We need connections. We need a community here. So please join us.
Tell the little story.
Yes.
Tell the little story that you gave us earlier, how you've grown just over the last several months.
Yes, so Affirmation Hawaii chapter is a off-campus community, and we started in February, and the number was like 20 members, and then in March we have this event in person, and it reached to 40%. But now, currently, after a few months, our chapter has reached currently 190 members currently. Wow. Growing from 20 members to 190 members in just a few months in 2020. So that is such an incredible change. I was like, oh, I must be doing something right.
You have an impressive destiny.
You're doing a lot right. That was an incredible video.
Thank you. And I love that you mentioned being gay is a gift from God, because I know that God gave me this gift because he knows I can handle the crisis, and he knows I am strong enough to support and advocate for the people I love.
Okay. So aloha to everybody.
I just wanted to say one thing. There's someone that re-asked a question. The person that asked that question, feel free to email me the question and we can discuss some of this stuff as well. But thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr.
Hello.
Take care.
Have a great night, everyone. Aloha.
Aloha.